This is your inner state on the interstate.
Hello, and welcome back to your inner state on the interstate. And today we're going to be talking about dealing with indecision. So, on today's episode, we're going to start off with talking about different ways that people do make decisions and what really doesn't work. And then later, we're going to get into how you can tune into your inner knowing to make decisions that are for your highest good. So, in general, I find that the difficulty in making decisions is usually when there's a good decision. So I'll give an example. In 2009, I was in northern India and taking a documentary photography workshop. And I remember I was just struggling between a couple of photos, and I would ask other people, what do you think? What's better, this one or this one? And a friend had said, well, if you can't decide between those two, then probably neither of them are good enough. I was so sure that I had to decide between just these two options. And this person gave me an option that was beyond just these two options. A third option, which is that there's something better. There's something beyond what you already have. And my indecisiveness, I believe, was really about the fact that there was a better option that I just couldn't see or perceive at that point in time. I think that's a good reflection on how we make decisions incorrectly. And really, I don't believe that there's an incorrect or wrong or bad decision. But what I mean is when we get stuck or when we're dwelling on a point of decision, it's usually that we're not seeing from a large enough perspective. Decision and indecisiveness has been one of the themes that's been coming up recently. And sometimes I meet people who either have some bit of indecision that they're dealing with, or they tell me that they're indecisive people. And I just laugh because I understand so well. I used to be the queen of indecision. And so I can relate with anyone who comes to me with that concern. And so I'm going to share some strategies that I used to do that did not work, but, served me for that period of time. So the first strategy that I used to take earlier in life was called delay and avoid. So I would just do whatever I could to not have to make a decision. The longer that I could leave things ambiguous, the better. Somehow not choosing those limited paths was actually closer to what I really wanted than either of those paths. I'm going to go ahead and share an example. So when I was really young, it was basically programmed into me that I was to be a doctor or a lawyer. I know a lot of people grew up with that mentality. In addition to my own upbringing, the education systems that I grew up in also kind of programmed me to fit into a particular box in terms of this is what your career should be, this or this or this or this. And to be honest, nothing really resonated with me in terms of a traditional career. And when I had to declare a major in undergrad, it was extremely stressful because I would project what I would imagine me choosing a particular track. And so I remember I just waited until the very last moment possible. Just delay and avoid. At that point in my life, my scope of what life is and what it should be and how to navigate it was really limited based on my own programming and exposure at that time. And I was trained to see very linearly, but my heart and my mind perceived non-linearly. So once I realized that the indecision paralysis I had was more of a hindrance than just picking something random, I started using a second strategy. And that one was just to use random divination tools just to make any decision. And I would follow them with my belief that there are no bad or wrong decisions. It was actually really easy for me to just say flip a coin and follow it. Again, it's because I was working with good decisions. That's where I would get stuck. So I figured, well, why not just follow whatever the coin would say? So I used a number of different tools. I used a pendulum for a while, and I also had a random technique of writing my different options on little pieces of paper, folding them up into little balls, putting them in my hands and shaking them up until I had one little piece of paper left in my hand, and I would follow that. And I found that it was useful just to make a decision. It was a step forward from complete just indecision paralysis. I think that some of these divination tools actually do tap into our subconscious mind, so it felt like a step in the right direction. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't quite it. This wasn't what I was looking for. I didn't want to live my life based on these arbitrary decision-making techniques. So it took some time and some trusting and some coin flipping, but I finally was led to learn how to get really quiet and to connect to something higher. By that, I mean creator, God, universal energy. You can call it whatever you'd like. I found how to really deeply connect and to be open to receiving answers about what would be for my highest good. And sometimes, no, most of the time, it went beyond my logic. It was against what my logic would say, but I learned that this higher intelligence always led me in the right direction. And sometimes these days I do use muscle testing, or I'll just connect directly to that higher energy and allow myself to receive answers. And it tends to come in the form of words or some visualization, some image of what it is I need to do or who I need to talk to. Now I'm 100% confident in the decisions that I make because I know that I'm not making it alone. I believe that everyone has this ability to connect deeply and to receive what is for their highest good. And I think that it takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of trust to be able to let go enough to your own logical, rational mind of you thinking that you know everything. And all the different variables in order to be open to a possibility that is beyond. You might say that I don't make decisions by myself anymore, and I'm really proud of that. Eckhart Tolle, if you don't know who he is, he wrote a number of books, including The Power of Now. And in that book, he talks about when he was going through a big crisis, considering suicide, and he kept thinking, I cannot live with myself any longer. That thought just kept repeating in his head, I cannot live with myself any longer. I cannot live with myself any longer. And then he became aware that, wait, who is the I and who is the myself? Am I one or am I two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two, the I and the self. And maybe only one of them are real. I like to use different terms for the same thing, which is the small I and the big I. And what I mean by that is that the small I is the ego self. It's the personality self. It's the self that interacts with the world. And then there's the big I. The big I is the I that is connected to everything. And in Eckhart Tolle's understanding, the I that he was tired of, the one that he couldn't live with any longer, was the small I. And we all have this small I in this experience of being human for the most part. And the small I, the ego self, wants us to feel small, does make us feel small, does make us feel disempowered and limited, and brings us to a state of fear. Meanwhile, the big I makes us feel peaceful, connected, strong, empowered, wise. And I want everyone to remember the big I, and when they're in a point of indecision, to connect with the big I that knows the best for you, that knows what you're feeling, what your real needs are. And in A Course in Miracles, which has been a significant text in my own experience, it talks about decisions, and that decisions are continuous. You do not always know when you are making them. And also that really the only decision that we have to make is to decide by ourselves, separate from our source, or decide with the spirit, connected with our source. And ultimately, that's really the only decision that needs to be made. But because decisions are continuous, it's a constant choice to choose with source and interchanging these different terms, making a decision with the big I. And you can tell when you're making a decision with the small I or separate from your source when you're left feeling confused, you're left feeling bad about yourself, lost. All of those things are because you're deciding to listen to the small I. And the amazing thing is that we always have the ability to choose again. A Course in Miracles also says that the power of decision is your last remaining freedom as a prisoner in this world. So I'm talking about, this kind of higher level metaphysical concept here, but to apply it to the real world is really not very different. If we can allow ourselves through this experience of being in this world to listen to that bigger I, then the decision making in the real world becomes easy. And if it isn't, if it seems like a struggle or is difficult, then it means that you're not deciding to listen to the spirit. To me, it comes back to the feeling. And so many people make decisions without the spirit unknowingly, and it's not wrong or bad, but it does leave people feeling very unsettled. I mean, it's what I felt for most of my life. I struggled with feeling all sorts of emotions and feeling lost and confused and directionless and purposeless, but I didn't realize that it came down to this, which is simply choosing to listen to and choosing to connect with the source. And now that I have learned it and practiced it over and over again, I can tell you that it works. I have made decisions that people thought I was literally crazy to do, but ultimately has led me to more happiness than I had ever experienced before that. And so it takes a lot of practice, and it also takes a lot to trust in the knowing that there's something more that our little brains can't comprehend yet. I mean, that's how a lot of innovations and big discoveries are made. They come like a flash of lightning. They come from believing in something that hasn't been proven yet. I think about the discovery, quote unquote, of DNA. It took scientists a while to discover it, but it doesn't mean that it didn't exist before. It took a leap of faith. It took a big leap of faith for scientists to dedicate their lives to trusting that there's this code, that there's something out there, or in there really, without having hard evidence. Before any microorganisms like viruses and bacteria were known, I think about this Hungarian doctor, Ignaz Semmelweis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but hey, he was collecting data and trying to understand why a lot of women in maternity wards were dying from childbed fever. And after a bit of research, he realized that childbed fever wasn't something that just women in childbirth got, but it was also other people in the hospital. And he recognized that there were cadaverous particles, little pieces of dead body, that the students who were dissecting cadavers got on them. And then when they would deliver babies, those particles would get into the women who got the disease and died. So he made the connection about cleanliness and washing hands, which is extremely relevant to today. So his hypothesis was that washing your hands and getting rid of the cadaverous particles would reduce the childbed fever. But at that time, people didn't know about germs. They didn't know how these microorganisms worked. And because of politics and his lack of communication skills, he actually lost his job and no one listened to him. And he actually ended up in a mental asylum. The moral of this story, though, is that even though germs hadn't been proven, people didn't understand how these tiny particles worked, he did know. The point is that there's so much that we don't know. And in order to get solutions, we sometimes have to go beyond what we already know is true to get ourselves to take that leap to expand our knowing and understanding and consciousness, you actually have to first recognize that you don't know. When you can let go of thinking that you do know, thinking that you do know what your options are, of thinking that you know the outcome, then you actually open yourself up to possibilities that didn't exist before. Think back about some earlier time in your life where you were indecisive and how in that moment you couldn't decide, but now looking back, you have so much experience to be able to see more clearly in hindsight. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty floating around, and just know that there's probably something even bigger and better that is happening for you than you have been able to conjure up so far. So sometimes people do reach out to me when they can't make a decision, and I don't recommend things for people. I don't recommend decisions, but I do help people to connect with their deepest part of themselves and let them know that they actually already know, and that is never wrong. Everyone has the answer inside. And yeah, sometimes it's useful to help to get other perspectives, to help us see outside of ourselves. But if we can dig deep enough, we have all of the answers within. So how do you get quiet enough to listen? Well, like meditation, there are practices that you can develop which makes it easier to connect with that deep inner knowing just a lot more easily. So let's do it right now. So wherever you are, get into a comfortable and safe spot where you can just close your eyes and take a few deep breaths, just sinking in to the here and now, and allow yourself to go far inward to the deepest and quietest place within yourself. And for some people, that might be around the heart or the solar plexus. Just follow whatever feels right for you and allow yourself to sink into that inner quiet, that inner place of knowing. And once you're there, you can ask that inner quiet whatever question that you might have. It could be as simple as, what do I focus on right now for the next 5-10 minutes? Or it could be, what's the next step I need to take in life or in this relationship or my business? And get quiet enough that you hear an answer, or you might be shown an answer. And you'll know that it's not the answer when you start evaluating and judging what you receive. So from here, I'll give you a minute to just deeply connect and to be open to receiving. And so the more that you can trust in that, in what you receive, the more in alignment that you can be to your true purpose here. And it happens step by step. I like to think of that inner quiet like a muddy pond. Sometimes there's so much activity around that the mud never settles. But the more time and space that you can allow for that stillness to be, the cleaner that the water gets, the more clear the reflection, and the deeper that you can see. I personally do this every day when I'm still in bed. I haven't gotten up yet. And beyond my usual to-do list, I'll also receive different flashes or words. So you can allow yourself to get quiet and listen when you're faced with indecision, or you can integrate it more into your daily life and allow yourself to practice it regularly. And I find that the more time that I create for myself for this, the less that I ever am faced with indecision. It gives me more clarity than any to-do list could give. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope that you found this useful. And don't forget to share, subscribe, and check out the website for more meditations and tips. All right, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Inner State on the Interstate. For more information, visit yourinnerstate.love. Wind on your face now, standing in place now. It's all at your pace now. It's calling.